Yo, what's up, guys? Parnellyx, and Riot dropped this tweet last night talking about the 11.13 mobility item changes they've been talking about. That's going to hit PBE today, and yeah, I want to talk about these just because the fact that they're interesting. There's a lot to cover, and on top of that, they affect Warwick, and I think there's some really good changes for Warwick in here. So I want to talk about that as well. But yeah, basically the premise of these changes is they're trying to tone down on the movement speed and the amount of dashes that items provide, so champions like Darius and Udyr won't be able to run you down as much anymore. That is the premise with these changes. So yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at them. So Stridebreaker is the first one on the menu. And this is actually just the most important change of them all, for Warwick at least. I mean, honestly, in general, actually, because this is the one that actually got changed the most. But this item right here, Stridebreaker, 11.13, is looking so fire for Warwick. It's looking so good. Let's just talk about it. So they are removing the dash on Stridebreaker. It's now just going to be just like Gore Drinker, AoE damage, AoE slow, okay? There's no more dash, no more gap close. So that champions like Darius won't be able to just, just dash at you, basically. They are buffing the halting slash damage from 75% of your total AD to 150% of your total AD. The slow is getting buffed from 40% decaying over 2 seconds, which used to be 60%, by the way, a couple patches ago, to 90%, decaying to 40% over 3 seconds. Huh? You guys see this number? This number is like a little bit too big in my opinion. I think this is actually going to get nerfed, by the way. I suspect this is going to go down to like 70%, but this is quite a big slow. You're like thresholding an entire team, basically. And then the halting slash cooldowns going down from 20 seconds to 15 seconds. Keep in mind, I think this does get affected from CDR still. So that is a very, very short cooldown. Halting slash can now be cast while moving. So you can just be running at someone, press the active, and you're not going to stop. And then the heroic gate passives this is the on hits movement speed that you get. It's getting nerfed from 30 to 20. Mythic passive is getting nerfed from 3% movement speed per legendary item to 2% movement speed per legendary item. And the health is getting buffed from 200 to 400 health. And yeah, just for Warwick, this just looks absolutely insane. AD Warwick might be back. AD Warwick might be back on the menu. I don't know if it's going to be similar to the Warrior Wick build that I went last season or Zombie Wick, but AD Warwick is certainly going to be back on the menu to some extent. I don't know if it's going to be the best build. I don't know if it's just going to be decent, but I am certainly excited for these changes because thank God I finally have an option when building AD. So first of all, in regards to its relevance to Warwick, halting slash no longer dashes user 300 units. Doesn't really matter. Doesn't really matter most of the time. Generally speaking, with Warwick, he doesn't really. Well, I guess he kind of struggles with closing the gap sometimes, but not as much as someone like Darius or Garen. It's really not that big of a deal. With Warwick, when you get on top of a target, you want to stick on top of them. So having this massive slow helps with that. Also, if you're going AD Warwick, this total AD ratio getting buffed to this much is ridiculous. The burst damage it's going to do is obscene. Warwick's Q is like a 1.2 AD ratio. This is a 1.5 AD ratio. That's 2.7 in total. 270% of your AD is going to be just dealt to the enemy champion in one go. On top of that, your passive is 15% of your bonus AD plus base damage. Plus, it does like 10% of the enemy's max health. The burst damage is going to be ridiculous. AD Warwick is going to do so much burst damage with Stridebreaker now. And this is a big deal because and one of the big benefits to AD Warwick in previous seasons, like last season, is you wanted... And why it kind of sucks this season is you want to deal enough burst damage to a squishy target, that you can bring them below 50% health like right away. If a target's like 80% max health and you Q them and you activate your active item, you want to burst them so that you get the attack speed immediately. Because if you're building raw AD and Warwick, your DPS is not going to be good unless they're low on health. This helps you get down to that threshold, which is just nuts. On top of that, you might be able to actually skip Tiamat. You might be able to rush straight into Stridebreaker because this active damage is pretty nuts, right? It's just a, if you use this on Raptor Camp, all the Raptors are going to be below 50% health, probably. I don't actually know the numbers. I'm going to have to test it myself, but that's what I'm hoping for. I think this will make your clear so much better without needing to rush Tiamat. Now, you're still going to want to get Titanic Hydra probably at some point because it's such a good item, but not having to rush it is very nice. It's very, very nice. And on top of that, by the way, yes, your clear is probably going to be slower if you're skipping Tiamat early on, but it's not going to be as big of a deal anymore because of the fact that the jungle got changed, meaning that well, you're not going to fall as far behind if you're a little bit, if you're a little bit slower than other champions. So I think generally speaking, you might be able to just skip Tiamat. I'm still got to test it out, but that's something I'm going to test out on PB later today. This slow is just nuts. Like I said, helps you stick onto targets as Warwick and secure kills so much easier. So much easier. This is crazy. One of the issues actually, by the way, this season for Warwick is all the movement speed in the game. It makes it hard for Warwick to stick onto his targets. So not only are all these items getting nerfed, but now he's going to have a bigger slow potentially to use to keep the target on top of them, and that's just beautiful. But on top of like the personal selfish just slow to shred a target, this active is going to be so nuts in team fights. It gives you so much utility in team fights. Even if you're behind, whether you're behind or ahead, you're going to have a giant AoE slow that affects everyone. So yeah, even if you get quote unquote outscaled at some point, you're still going to be able to impact team fights. If you were ahead, this will just make it that much easier to kill your opponents. So I think this slow is so insane. Like, it's really hard to describe like how insane like a AoE slow is for work in team fights, but like the utility, like current Stridebreaker, you use these active in a team fight, and the benefit you get out of it is just really, really good. The problem with current Stridebreaker is just its stats, but like this active has such a big impact in fights, and now that it's going to be basically getting, the slow is getting more than doubled in fights, it's going to be just crazy. Halting slash cooldown, I mean, it's just a lower cooldown. What's not to love about that? Halting slash can now be cast while moving. I mean, it's not really a big deal for work because you can cast it while Q, but this is another point I want to bring up. One of the issues with Stridebreaker the last few patches is you couldn't use the Stridebreaker active during your Q. If you, this is because they changed it so that Stridebreaker you couldn't dash while rooted. They wanted to prevent that from happening because that was like something that was happening. So they hard-coded it so that you couldn't use Stridebreaker active while rooted from like Morgana Q and stuff like that. But for some reason, Work's Q counts as being rooted or grounded or something like that. So you'd have to wait for your Q to end before you could use Stridebreaker. And that's very clunky, and it definitely has some problems like usage-wise. You're not going to be able to burst enemies down as fast, basically, or secure barons and stuff like that. But being able to just Q Stridebreaker active is going to feel much better, and it's going to just be much better. It's going to be just so nice that you can use that combo again for burst. The movement speed, getting this reduced is no big deal. It's just an on hit. Every time you attack something, you get 10. You're going to be losing 10 movement speed compared to before, but it's not a big deal, generally speaking. You're also going to be losing a little bit of movement speed. Again, not a big deal. I don't think Warwick really needs movement speed. Most of the time, there's definitely some situations where you're going to miss the movement speed for sure. You're going to miss the dash sometimes for sure, but it is situational. Most of the time, you don't care because you're getting so much more. And then on top of that, you're getting 200 extra health on Stridebreaker. The health is getting doubled. It's matching Gore Drinker. This is 500 gold in value in terms of health. Just add it on it for free. It's basically, the cost is staying the same. It's just getting an extra 500 gold in health. And all you're really losing out on, is the dash. That's basically it. So, and I love this item when it had 300 health. When it had 300 health a couple patches ago, I liked the item. So this is going to be just so much better. And I think Stridebreaker is really, I think it's going to be a top tier item for work. Again, I don't know if it's going to be something you build every game. might just be a playstyle difference, but I know I personally am going to love it. I'm going to try to make it work, and we'll have to wait and see, but I think it'll be up there. Maybe Sunfire will still be like, really good. Probably Sunfire will still be really good. Divine Thunder will probably be also pretty good as well. But Stridebreaker being an extra option is awesome, and I love it because I think Warwick's been kind of boring this season. Even though I still like Warwick, obviously, he's just been kind of boring. Every item feels the same. This is going to spice it up a little bit more. Triforce changes. Movement speed on hits. It's being reduced by 5. Again, don't really care. Attack damage getting upped by 5, which is good. One of the big issues with Training Force is its attack damage is just pitiful. It has 30 this patch. It's terrible for a AD item. I still think it could use more. I think it could be just buffed up to 40 without any extra gold costs because the item is very mediocre. No one really buys it. But it's a step in the right direction. As far as Warwick's concerned, I think it's a very situational item. Well, I shouldn't even really say that. I had never built it, but I think this might make it a situational item. It's definitely not going to be a meta item, but it could be more situational. So that's progress. But again, like I said, I think it could use an extra buff in terms of AD. Force of Nature, it's losing its MR and movement speed stacking on its passive. But instead, when you get immobilized, so just CC'd, you regenerate 8% of your maximum health over 4 seconds. So basically, you just get Mundo passive. I think that this is going to be... I do kind of like their approach to this change to the item. They actually just changed the passive. That is literally as that. They're not trying to nerf the passive, make it less, annoying. They actually try to be creative with Force of Nature, give it something unique, which I think is fine. But as far as Warwick is concerned, I think this is definitely a nerf. I don't really build Force of Nature at a ton right now, but I think I don't really like this active for Warwick because enemies are probably going to be building Grievous Wounds, which is obviously going to reduce the health regen you get when you're immobilized. I did see on Warwick main someone mentioned that you want to be building this against teams that have lots of small short stuns because it doesn't matter the duration of the CC. If they stun you, if you get Riven stun for half a second, you're going to regenerate 8% of your maximum health. So that is something to consider, but I don't think Warwick's going to get a ton of value out of this healing. I don't know. I could be wrong, but I think considering a lot of people are building Grievous Wounds, it's not going to be as effective. So it's going to be more of 3.5% of your maximum health over 4 seconds, which is that's doesn't really sound too good. That's assuming they have the full Grievous Wounds item, but still. Black Cleaver, it's getting its health reduced by 50. That is kind of irrelevant, honestly. And it's getting its movement speed per stack of Carve reduced to 18 total instead of 30. I think that this is just kind of a nerf for Black Cleaver. I don't think anyone likes this change. 50 health isn't that relevant. If it went up to 500, it'd be more relevant, but 50 is whatever. And as far as Warwick's concerned, it's a very situational item. He usually doesn't really like Black Cleaver. By the way, I don't even like this passive being in the game. This passive, again, it's just too boring. They just added onto the mobility creep for no reason. I know the old Black Cleaver passive was, they wanted to change it, but they could have changed this to something better instead of something lazy like movement speed per stack of Carve. I still wish they would change that, but yeah, I don't know. Overall, I think it's a nerf to Black Cleaver, and it's not something that Warwick really likes in general. So it's kind of irrelevant, but it is a situational item, so it is kind of relevant occasionally. The Dead Man's Plate change is something that I can't really decide on, honestly. It's got its charge time reduced to 4 seconds from 8 seconds, so it's ramp up time in total. Its maximum movement speed is reduced from 60 to 40, which it looks big at first, but when you consider the ramp time change, I think it's actually might be overall buff. Basically, the implication of this is your initial engage in a fight, you're going to be slower, but your follow-up, if you get stunned and you have to catch up to someone again, it's not going to take 8 seconds to catch up to someone. It's going to take 4 seconds. So because you're going to reach the 40 movement speed a little bit faster, I think this is actually overall a buff for bruisers in fights. And the damage on hit is getting a little bit of a buff to the scaling in the late game. Actually, it's getting a buff at all stages of the game. So that is kind of nice. You're going to be able to proc it more as well. So I think Dead Man's Plate is actually getting buffed. The more I look at it, the more I think it's getting buffed. But I don't really like it too much on Warwick right now, just because I think the stats got nerfed a little bit too much. I think it's yeah, I just don't think it's as good right now as it used to be. But it is definitely a situational item for Warwick, so this is going to be more attractive potentially. Death's Dance is getting its heal on champion takedown buff from 10% to 15%, and it's getting its bonus movement speed on takedowns removed. Overall, I think this is better, just with like, I think this is like a nerf to Warwick if you're like snowballing really hard and you're trying to like take over a team fight, go from one target to the next. But Warwick's not that great at like, you know, going from one target to the next in general. So generally speaking, I think it's pretty irrelevant. And just having a little bit extra tankiness after securing a kill to escape a fight and survive, I think is a little bit more impactful. This just gives you more like raw stats in a fight, basically. More raw stats. I mean, like 5% of physical damage taken within the last couple seconds. Like, how much is that going to be? I don't know. That's probably going to be like 200 health or something like that. But that's pretty big. If you get like an extra 200 health in the middle of a team fight, like twice, that's 400 health, and that's pretty good. So it's pretty much an adjacent change, but I think overall it's pretty good for Warwick. I'd say on average it's going to be better for Warwick. But anyways, the items that are relevant to Warwick are going to be Gale Force, 2% movement speed instead of 3% movement speed on the Mythic passive, which is fine. Prowler's Call is getting its cooldown nerfed to 90 seconds, and you're also not going to be able to dash to minions anymore. I will say, I've been playing a lot of Qiyana recently, so seeing this Prowler's Call change makes me kind of sad, because one of the core combos for Qiyana was to Prowler's Call to a minion, and then use your E-dash to close a huge distance. It was a really cool form of skill expression. But I understand why they are changing this, because it was kind of cheesy to like dash to minions and do something like that. But I don't know. It's like they're attacking the active on Prowler's Call, when I think the active is like the worst part of it. I think it just needs to have its attack damage reduced by like 5 or something like that, or its lethality reduced, because it just has so many raw stats. But it did need a nerf. It definitely did need a nerf, so that's fine. Trelia's Battle Song, it's got its active movement speed reduced from 60% decaying movement speed to 30% non-decaying movement speed. I think this is fine. They're just, you know, making it so it's not as bursty of movement speed, while still being, you know, about the same overall, which I think is fine. Lich Bane, it has its movement speed reduced from 10% to 8%, and its ability power increased from 70 to 75. This is honestly the most irrelevant change of all time. Lich Bane just kind of sucks as an item in general. I think they could give it like 85 AD, or sorry, 85 AP, and it would still be fine. It would not be overpowered. They definitely could buff Lich Bane a little bit more. Its gold efficiency is pretty bad, and it could use more AP. I'd like to see it go up to like 85 AP, honestly, in general. But the movement speed nerf is, yeah, that's fine. I don't know why this item even really gives movement speed to begin with, but whatever. Cosmic Drive is getting its movement speed reduced to 20, which is perfectly fine. Just more linear. Or it's not linear anymore, it's just more flat, right? And its AP increased to 5 to compensate. Again, that's kind of fine, because, I mean, the item's already pretty good. And the Nimbus Cloak is getting kind of the hammer. This Nimbus Cloak, I already dropped it a while ago when they nerfed the smite percentage down to 5%. So it's not really like on junglers anymore, but it's like, I don't know who's going to be going Nimbus Cloak anymore. It's just, the numbers are just kind of trash, honestly. 5% to 25%. I'm pretty sure on release, it was something like 15% to 40% or something like that. Like, it used to be way more movement speed from every single summoner spell, but now it's just very subpar. Like, you'll only notice it with Flash. And I just think I think it just got over nerfed. Especially when you consider like this, like Nimbus Cloak's attached to summoner spells. It's like such a long cooldown to like get value out of this. So yeah, I really don't think I like the change. I think something they could do is give it 1 second extra on the movement speed bonus, but if they don't want the movement speed to be as bursty, but I don't know. I think that's a little bit too much of a nerf. But in general, to just kind of wrap it up, basically, I'm really excited for the Stridebreaker buffs. Like, really, really excited. I think these look so good. I don't think these numbers are going to be released this way, though. Or they're not going to stay this way. This just looks kind of overpowered. Like the slow. The slow, I think, is a little bit too much. I think it'll get nerfed, but generally speaking, it's probably going to be still pretty good. But yeah, it just definitely looks like really, really good for Warwick right now. Trinity Force buff is nice, but it's not going to be good enough, in my opinion, yet. Force of Nature is a nerf overall, but I do like the direction of the item overall. Black Cleaver is getting a little bit of a nerf. They need to change the passive. Deadman's Plate, I think, is overall a good change. What this actually does is it does prevent champions like Singed or Aurelion Soul from abusing Deadman's Plate. It's weird to say abusing because it's not like they're overpowered, but obviously Riot doesn't want those type of champions to build it. They don't want mages to be building Deadman's Plate. So I think that was part of the direction with the way they took. It was part of the direction with with changing Deadman's Plate this patch. Death Stance change I think is overall good. And then all these nerfs are fine in general. Minus Lich Bane needs to get buffed more, and Nimbus Cloak is a little bit of an over nerf. So yeah, really, really excited for 11.13. I'm going to be trying out the Stridebreaker probably later today on PBE. And I'm just going to be doing some experimenting. I'm going to try out no Tiamat Rush into Stridebreaker. But yeah, those are the changes. So let me know what you guys think in the comments, and yeah, peace.